Geometric elements of the structures built by ancient humans have been analyzed and studied by modern scholars and scientists for several decades. But recently they've discovered that the geometric patterns incorporated into these thousands of year-old structures have a deeper meaning and relation with physics and biology. The geometry of ancient Egyptian relics has particularly caught the eye of experts. We're finding out new and mind-blowing things about the vast knowledge of ancient Egyptians. The geometry of ancient Egypt was a necessary outgrowth of surveying in order to preserve ownership of farmland that was annually flooded by the Nile River. But now, after studying the pyramids and hieroglyphs in detail, experts have found patterns and measurements that Egyptian architects and engineers at that time allegedly should have no idea about. Geometry for the ancient Egyptians meant far more than the study of points, lines, surfaces, solids, and their respective properties and measurements. The harmony evident in geometry was considered one of the most cogent expressions of a divine plane that underlies the world in ancient Egypt. They believed it was a metaphysical plane that determines the physical one. For them, geometry was the means by which humanity could finally unravel and understand the mysteries of the divine order. Geometry exists in every part of nature. Its order underlies the structure of all things, including molecules, biological beings, and galaxies. The nature of geometric form allows its functioning. The design should also achieve the same goal using the principles of sacred geometry. Sacred geometry doesn't only deal with the proportions of geometrical figures, it also concerns the harmonic relations of the parts as a whole. For instance, the parts of the human being as they relate to one another, the forms of crystals and natural objects, and the structure of plants and animals. All of these are a manifestation of the universal continuum. The key principle of harmonic proportion or sacred geometry is the relationship between the progression of growth and proportion. Both harmonic proportion and progression are the essence of the created universe. Nature surrounding us also follows this harmonious relationship. The natural progression follows a series famous as the Fibonacci series. Since this existed before Fibonacci shouldn't bear his name, many have resorted to calling it the summation series. It is a progressive series where you start with the first two numbers in the ancient Egyptian system, which are 2 and 3. Then you add their total to the preceding number and on and on. So any figure is the sum of the two preceding ones. The summation series is reflected throughout nature, from the number of seeds in a sunflower to the growth of a nautilus shell. There's overwhelming evidence that indicates this series was known to the ancient Egyptians. The plans of temples and tombs throughout the long history of Egypt indicate that the major elements of the temples are positioned along the longitudinal axis following the consecutive numbers of the summation series. The dimensions of the ancient Egyptian monuments in the ancient unit called the cubit clearly shows that this series was the brainchild of ancient Egyptians. It conforms perfectly with Egyptian mathematics and can therefore be regarded as its expression. There's evidence indicating Egyptians had knowledge about the summation series since the Pyramid Temple of Khafra at Giza was built in 2500 BCE. The essential points of the temple comply with the summation series that reaches the figure of 233 cubits in its total length, as measured from the pyramid, with 10 consecutive numbers from the series. People are starting to believe that all aspects of our modern geometry were perfected thousands of years ago in ancient Egypt. The advanced knowledge of these people is quite evident from the few recovered papyri, now called the ancient Egyptian mathematical papyri. There's also a possibility that these pyramids of Giza are still standing because of the perfect geometry and divine measurements that help build these massive structures. The Egyptian pyramids are now considered a wonderful representation of mathematical and geometric mysticism that is encoded into practically every living thing on Earth. The shape of a pyramid represents the Earth's foundation at the bottom, and the pointed top represents the path to higher realms of consciousness. Most pyramids are sacred geometric shapes in one way or the other. It is believed that architects use the principle of harmonic resonance in their creation. Near perfect and accurate measurements were maintained in order to create a seamless connection to Earth's harmonics and vibrations. The Great Pyramid of Giza also has an intentional connection to Orion and Sirius. The southern shaft from the king's chamber was constructed in a way to be directed towards the Orion constellation that represents Osiris. The Queen's Chamber, which ironically happens to have triangle-shaped doorways, also has a southern shaft that is aligned with Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. It is also notable that the Egyptian pyramids were built mostly of limestone and crystals that vibrate at the same frequency as Earth because of the piezoelectric effect. So at the very least, the pyramids do represent the mystical but simple powers of the Earth. Every single material and equation used in pyramid building by ancient Egyptians can be easily found in nature or the heavens. One very interesting theory proposed that the Great Pyramid was not built by slaves but by skilled, high-level craftsmen who used the principles of resonance and sound to neutralize Earth's gravity and float and move the massive blocks of vibration. The sacred geometry involved in the Pyramid of Giza is also considered a scaled representation of the Earth, moons, and our human bodies, and the pyramid clearly demonstrates pi. This is mind-boggling, as the Greeks have been credited with the discovery of pi about 2,000 years after the pyramid was built. It is actually found in precisely the ratio you need to calculate the circumference of a sphere from its radius. If you take the pyramid's height and multiply it with 2 pi, you get an exact printout of the perimeter of the base. The pyramid also demonstrates the equatorial circumference and polar radius of planet Earth. Multiplying the height of the pyramid by 43,200 gives you an exact printout of the polar radius of the Earth, and multiplying the base perimeter by 43,200 gives you the equatorial circumference of the Earth. Eckhart R. Schmitz, who wrote the book The Great Pyramid of Giza: Decoding the Measure of a Monument, believes undoubtedly that the pyramid is a 43,200 to 1 scale model of the Earth. He explained the relationships between what he calls the code numbers found in the pyramid. He also demonstrated that squaring the circle, the golden ratio, and phi can be seen too. A simple observation is that there are exactly 43,200 seconds in 12 hours, and the volume of the King's Chamber, when multiplied by 43,200 million is actually equal to the volume of the Earth to within an accuracy of 99.83%. And the ancient Egyptians understood that it was possible to create a direct resonant exchange like with an antenna using the correct geometric figures. Sacred geometry actually became an antenna that used to resonate with a certain higher plane. So in human beings, the emotional body and function are associated with what is called the outer plane in Western tradition. It is called the astral plane, which is derived from the root aster, which means star, which is a source of light. The forms that connect to this plane are the hemisphere and the pyramid. This means when the Egyptians used the pyramid form, the shape acted like an antenna for the astral plane. This is also why it's believed that ancient Egyptians knew all along that by modifying the shape of the pyramid, they could alter its resonance of the pyramid. This was done by making a slight indentation in the 4 faces of the pyramid. These indentations are very mild and can only be noticed when seen from above. This actually changed the resonance of the pyramid in the general astral plane to resonate with the higher astral plane. It is important to note the lower astral in the general astral plane has some confusing energetics. By doing this, you can clean up the energy that is being projected by the pyramid. So one of the greatest secrets of the Great Giza Pyramid is that the geometrics act like antennas that can resonate with higher planes of creation. There's also a secondary effect through which they emanate through the shape-caused wave, a certain vibration resulting from that certain connection. The ancient Egyptians apparently knew a lot about it. They were able to work with sub-bands or sub-energies inside the general bands. This is also manifested by the placement of the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. It is not present exactly in the middle as expected. In fact, it is around 6 degrees and 15 minutes off center. This is done in order to receive a carrier wave that is a sweet spot that can connect a person to higher dimensional levels using a carrier wave. That's why that place inside the King's Chamber was also used for energy initiation and other rituals. Furthermore, the Earth-Moon relationship is the only one in our solar system which contains the unique golden section ratio that squares the circles. The problem of squaring the circle was actually proven mathematically impossible in the 19th century, with pi being irrational and cannot be exactly measured. However, the Earth, Moon, and the Great Pyramid are all coming about as close as you can get to the solution. If the base of the Great Pyramid is equated with the Earth's diameter, then the radius of the Moon can be calculated by subtracting the radius of the Earth from the height of the pyramid. One of the most profound and significant things that encompassed within sacred geometry and the light source is the golden mean spiral, which is derived by using the golden ratio. The phi ratio is found in the architecture of the Great Pyramid in the triangle that is formed by the height, half base, and apothem. So in one way, the basic cross-section of the structure demonstrates the golden section. Another important piece of pyramid symbolism that needs to be mentioned is the concept of the Trinity. Throughout history, in every single religion and spiritual practice, the Trinity and the number 3 have been significant representations of pyramid symbolism. The Trinity of life, death, and rebirth has been linked with pyramids by those who believe that these structures were built as burial chambers and assisted the deceased spirits in their travels to the afterlife. Other notable trinities that can be related to the pyramid shape include the mind, body, and spirit trinity and the past, present, and future trinity. The Great Pyramid's elevation also encodes 3 of the most important constants in mathematics: pi, phi, and Euler's number. Interestingly, Euler's number wasn't discovered until 1618, so it is possible that that was just a rediscovery. And another mysterious relation was discovered in the sketch of the Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci. The Great Pyramid of Giza actually holds a perfect geometrical relation to the squaring of the circle and the Vitruvian Man. The triangle in the picture is the exact geometrical proportion of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The angles between the base and the apex of the pyramid are exactly 51 degrees and 51 seconds. Another concept that needs to be examined in order to better understand the sacred geometry instilled in the ancient Egyptian structures is radiesthesia. Radiesthesia is the name given to the science of using the vibrational fields of the human body to access the information about other objects of animate or inanimate nature. This is done by establishing resonance with their energy fields and using particular instruments to decode the information. Radiesthesia considers our body as the main instrument, since what we are doing is entering into a vibrational relationship with the object we are measuring and evaluating the quality of this interaction on our own body. The matter is an infinite arrangement of atoms made up of particles that are in a constant state of circular motion, also considered energy interaction. Matter vibrating at a relatively low frequency provides us with the solid state of our physical universe. Superimposed on this solid state of matter are energy fields that are vibrating at higher frequencies which are beyond the normal human sensory perception, but they may fall within the perception spectrum of other life forms such as common house pets who can see, hear, and smell stimulants we humans are unable to perceive. These energy fields remain unperceived because the technology that can render them perceivable hasn't been developed yet. These fields surrounding all living systems are a series of multidimensional energy fields that, together with the physical state, form the total living body that should be dealt with as a holistic. Radiesthesia also has its roots in ancient Egypt, where it was practiced as a precise science. The applications of this unique science were infinite. In the field of medicine, it enabled pharaonic surgeons to perform complex brain operations which require sophisticated technology today. In geology, every gold mine that modern satellites have discovered in the mostly uncharted Sinai Desert has actually been found and mined in earlier millennia by pharaonic geologists. The most striking example is the realization that the ancient Egyptians used geometrical shapes as a form of energy manipulation to achieve functional goals. The Great Pyramid of Cheops on the Giza Plateau located near Cairo is one example of the powerful geometrical energy emitters created by the ancient Egyptians. The strange properties of these pyramids have baffled researchers who have written hundreds of books on these features. Several ancient Egyptian beliefs also show people using pendular instruments. In others, we can see their gods holding powerful energy emitters in the form of scepters. A profound understanding of the physics behind radiesthesia is a prerequisite for the development of geometrical energy emitters, so it is evident that the ancient Egyptian knowledge was based on exact and precise scientific principles. The theories developed by the Greek philosophers like Pythagoras, Plato, and others in the field of numerology and sacred geometry are only fragments of the esoteric sciences that were initiated in Egypt. These sciences have unfortunately been lost, or just the simplified, misunderstood fragments have survived as ancient folklore and magical practices. The Waj amulet, also called the papyrus column or scepter, is an ancient Egyptian amulet in the shape of a papyrus stem. These were made out of turquoise, feldspar, or Egyptian faience, according to the Book of the Dead. These usually take the form of a papyrus stem, but are also known to encompass rectangular plaques with a depiction of papyrus on them. In ancient Egyptian, the word Waj meant green, although it is also known to refer to health and flourishing in life. These Waj amulets were a symbol of eternal youth and were placed over the dead around the neck upon burial to ensure eternal youth in the afterlife. These amulets have been dated to the late period of Egypt, particularly between the 26th and 30th dynasties. According to spells from the Book of the Dead, if the Waj amulet is found intact, the wearer is considered healthy in the afterlife. The later French researchers called it the Egyptian pendulum. The hemispherical cap of this pendulum creates a penetration carrier wave of energy that projects out from the tip. The double zigzag lines near the tip produce an energetic effect. These lines also depict the letter N in the hieroglyphic language. These can change the vibrational state of the ray coming from the cap so that before exiting through the tip, it is being cleansed of its detrimental components. Another hieroglyph depicting sacred geometric principles was found on the temple wall and has been mentioned in a book by de Lubitsch. He calls it Thoth, a master of numbers at Karnak. It shows something Egyptologists are quite aware of but do not understand the importance of. There's actually a background net that was used by master designers in ancient Egypt. They used it to lay out the figures on the temple wall. But the net wasn't just meant to help them arrange the aspects of the art on the wall. It also had a vibrational component that was quite significant. One of the primary grids they used was a 19-level grid. There's a certain power and importance related to the number 19. Sacred geometry and sacred numerology both contribute to these ancient figures and structures in every classical tradition. Just as shapes have power, so do numbers. The importance of the number 19 was well understood by ancient Egyptians. Therefore, it was a part of their 19-level vibrational grid. This knowledge was passed down to the next spiritual culture that reigned Egypt, which was Islam, so 19 is also a sacred number in Islam. The background grid of energy has also been represented in a malleable form in the hands of the initiates, which ancient Egyptians were able to directly manipulate and apply. In the hieroglyph of initiates with a net in their hands, the net actually symbolizes the fabric of space-time. It is actually the vibration grid that influences every living being and every structure in the world. The hieroglyphs accompanying such figures would often say things like, they are being taught how to catch and cast magic. And according to science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, magic is a term we give for a form of technology that we cannot understand. So what we now consider magic may have been an advanced form of technology used by the ancient Egyptians. Experts think that in the figures they're being taught how to use the vibrational matrices or grids that stand behind every single thing in the physical world. The human body is also based on a specific vibrational grid. Thoth is an ancient Egyptian deity represented in the hieroglyphs recovered. In art, he was often depicted as a man with the head of an ibis or a baboon. His feminine counterpart was Seshat and his wife was Maat. He was considered the god of the moon, wisdom, writing, hieroglyphs, science, magic art, and judgment. His chief temple is located in the city of Hermopolis. The Temple of Thoth was mostly destroyed before the beginning of the Christianity era. Its huge pronaos was still standing in 1826 but was demolished and used as fill for the foundation of a sugar factory in the mid-19th century. Thoth played many vital roles in Egyptian mythology. He maintained the universe and was one of the two deities who stood on either side of Ra's solar bark. In later history, Thoth became heavily associated with the arbitration of godly disputes, the arts of magic, the system of writing, and the judgment of the dead. The ancient Egyptians regarded Thoth as one, self-begotten and self-produced. He was the master of both physical and moral law. He is also credited with making the calculations for the establishment of the heavens, stars, earth, and everything in them. The ancient Egyptians also credited him as the author of all works of science, religion, philosophy, and magic. The Greeks further declared him the inventor of astronomy, astrology, numerology, mathematics, geometry, surveying, medicine, botany, theology, civilized government, the alphabet, reading, writing, and oratory. They also claim that Thoth was the true author of every work of every branch of knowledge, human and divine. The hieroglyph discussed in the book The Temple in Man by Shvala de Lubitsch depicts Thoth, who was considered the initiator of the spiritual culture in ancient Egypt. So whenever the Egyptians used the head of an animal, it represented a state of consciousness and a kind of primordial power. This means they didn't actually worship animals, they just understood that various aspects of power from the mind of God manifest themselves in different beings and different processes. Thoth wasn't the name given to this deity by Egyptians. The original name was closer to Jehuti. This being is shown stretching a cord. This stretching ritual in ancient Egypt is often associated with a mystery central to every spiritual tradition. How is it that we are conscious spiritual beings living in a physical world inside a physical body and have no recollection of who we are and how we got here? This is an indication that the entire process of creation is somehow connected to sacred geometry. The process of moving from singularity was the concept at the center in many ancient traditions. For instance, the Bindu point mentioned in the Himalayan tradition. From that zero-dimensional beginning singularity unified core point, we move out into the first dimension of space. This means the Thoth figure is stretching the cord in order to create space, which acts as a container in which conscious beings evolve and attain higher developmental states. Another representative of the sacred geometry in ancient Egyptian tradition is the was scepter. It is known by Egyptologists as a symbol that appeared in relics, art, and hieroglyphs associated with the ancient Egyptian religion. It appears as a stylized animal head at the top of a long straight staff having a forked end. These scepters were used as symbols of power or dominion. They were associated with ancient Egyptian deities such as Set or Anubis and the pharaoh. Was scepters also represented the Set animal or Khnum. In later use, it was a symbol of control over the force of chaos represented by Set. The Ankh is also a significant figure in sacred geometry according to experts. Ankh, or the key of life, was used in Egyptian art and writing to represent the word for life and by extension as a symbol of life itself. It has a cross shape but with a teardrop-shaped loop in place of a vertical upper bar. The origins of this symbol are not known, but many hypotheses have been proposed about it. The symbol was used as a triliteral sign representing a sequence of three constants. The Ankh was one of the most common decorative motifs in ancient Egypt and was also used decoratively by neighboring cultures. Egyptologists interpret the Ankh and was scepter as abstract symbols, but some experts think there's more to it. These are also geometric energy emitters, and the shapes represented by them were in fact the forms that emitted certain vibrational powers.